10-year-old Caleb Reed pressed his spine against the rough planks of Murphy's general store, hunger gnawing his belly like a wolf. The shopkeeper's wife had chased him off with a broom an hour ago, calling him vermin. Now, as the Texas sun bled orange across the dusty street of San Angelo, he whispered the only truth he knew. Nobody cares. The words tasted like ash. He didn't see the cowboy stop mid-stride 20 feet away, didn't notice the way Ethan Cole's weathered face went still, didn't know that one stranger's choice was about to rewrite everything. Damn. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, I'd love to know. Drop your city in the comments below so I can see how far Caleb's story travels. Hit that like button and settle in, because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances. The evening air in San Angelo carried the smell of horse sweat, tobacco, and desperation. Ethan Cole had been riding for 3 weeks straight, pushing cattle north through country so dry it cracked under your boots. His body ached in places he'd forgotten had names, and all he wanted was a hot meal, a bath, and a bed that didn't move. He tied his horse outside the hotel and was heading toward the saloon when he heard it. Not a shout, not a cry. Just a whisper, so quiet it barely disturbed the dust motes hanging in the slanted light. Nobody cares. Ethan stopped. His hand, halfway to pushing open the saloon door, froze. He turned slowly, scanning the weathered storefronts lining the main street. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the typical evening commerce of a cattle town. Then his eyes caught movement in the shadows beside Murphy's general store. A boy. Small. Thin as a fence post. Couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The child sat with his knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped tight around them like he was trying to hold himself together. His clothes were more holes than fabric, his face streaked with dirt, his feet bare and bleeding. But it wasn't the poverty that made Ethan's chest tighten, it was the look in those eyes. Flat, dead. The look of someone who'd already given up. Ethan knew that look. He'd seen it in his own mirror once, a lifetime ago. "Hey there," Ethan said, his voice gentler than he'd used in months. He approached slowly, the way you would a spooked horse. "You all right, son?" The boy's head jerked up, eyes going wide with something between fear and defiance. "Ain't your son. Ain't nobody's son." "Didn't say you were. Just asking if you're all right." "Do I look all right?" The words had more bite than a child that size should possess. Ethan crouched down, keeping his distance. Up close, he could see the fresh bruises on the boy's arms, the way he favored his left side. "When's the last time you ate?" The boy's jaw worked, pride and hunger warring across his face. Pride lost. "Yesterday. Maybe. How about we fix that?" Suspicion sharpened those young eyes. "Why? What do you want?" There it is, Ethan thought, the question every used-up child learns to ask. "Nothing. You hungry or not?" The boy stared at him for a long moment, measuring, calculating risks that no child should have to calculate. Finally, slowly, he nodded. "All right then. Come on." Ethan straightened, started walking toward the hotel restaurant. After a few steps, he heard the shuffle of bare feet on dirt behind him. The hotel clerk, a pinch-faced man named Harrington, looked up as they entered. His eyes went from Ethan to the boy, and his lip curled. "We don't serve his kind here." Ethan's voice went flat, cold as creek water in January. "His kind? You mean hungry children?" "I mean street rats who'll steal anything not nailed down. Mrs. Murphy already ran him off twice today." "Good thing we're not at Mrs. Murphy's establishment then, isn't it?" Ethan pulled out a silver dollar and set it on the counter with a sharp clink. "Room for the night, and send up 2 dinners, hot, filling, and plenty of it." Harrington's eyes fixed on the coin. Greed wrestled briefly with prejudice. Greed won, the way it usually did. "Room 6, top of the stairs." Ethan scooped up the key and gestured to the boy. "After you." The child climbed the stairs slowly, each step careful, like he was waiting for the trick, the catch, the inevitable cruelty. Ethan followed, keeping his movements calm and predictable. Room 6 was small but clean. A bed, a washstand, a single chair, and a window overlooking the street. The boy stood in the center of the room, hands clenched at his sides, looking like he might bolt any second. "You can sit," Ethan said, nodding toward the bed. "Food'll be up shortly." The boy perched on the very edge of the mattress, spine rigid. "You really ain't going to want nothing? Really? Men always want something." The words carried weight no child should carry. Ethan felt something twist in his gut. Anger, but not at the boy. Never at the boy. Not this man. Not tonight. A knock on the door announced dinner. Ethan tipped the serving girl an extra coin and carried the tray to the bed. 2 plates piled high with beef stew, cornbread, and beans. The boy's eyes went wide. "Eat," Ethan said simply, settling into the chair. For a moment, the child just stared at the food like it might disappear. Then hunger took over. He grabbed the spoon and shoveled stew into his mouth so fast Ethan worried he'd choke. "Slow down. It's not going anywhere." The boy slowed, but only slightly, his eyes darting between Ethan and the food with each bite. Gradually, as the first desperate edge of hunger faded, he began to eat more like a person and less like a starving animal. Ethan ate his own meal in silence, giving the child space to breathe. When both plates were clean, he poured water from the pitcher on the washstand and handed a glass to the boy. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, then shrugged like the answer didn't matter. "Caleb. Caleb Reed." "Ethan Cole." He extended his hand. Caleb looked at it like it might be a trap, but eventually reached out and shook. His hand was small, rough, and trembling slightly. "Where's your folks, Caleb?" "Dead. Pa died when I was 6. Cholera. Ma tried to keep us going, but..." He shrugged again, that terrible gesture of a child forced to accept the unacceptable. "She died last winter. Consumption." "Any other family?" "Uncle took me in after Ma died. Said I'd earn my keep." Caleb's voice went flat. "His idea of keeping was beating me if I didn't work fast enough, and not feeding me if I messed up. Left 2 months ago. Been on my own since." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen it before, children treated like livestock, or worse. "Anyone looking for you?" "Uncle won't care, and the town..." Caleb's laugh was bitter, wrong coming from someone so young. "Town thinks I'm trouble. Thief. Beggar. They ain't wrong, I guess. You steal when you're hungry enough. You beg when you're desperate enough. You're not trouble. You're a kid who's had a rough run." "That what I am?" Caleb's eyes were challenging now, testing. "Or am I just another mouth that's more trouble than it's worth?" The question hit Ethan square in the chest, because he knew what came next, what always came next with children like this. They got handed off, shuffled around, worked until they broke or grew big enough to run. The system didn't care about them. The world didn't see them. But Ethan saw this one, and something in that recognition wouldn't let him look away. "You got anywhere to go?" Ethan asked. "No?" "Anyone who'll take you in?" "No." "Then you'll stay here tonight. Get some sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Why? What's tomorrow going to change?" "Don't know yet. But you'll figure it out on a full stomach and a decent night's sleep, which is more than you've had in a while." For the first time, something flickered in Caleb's expression. Not hope exactly, but maybe the ghost of where hope used to live. You ain't one of them men who..." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You sleep in the bed. I'll take the floor, and the door stays unlocked. You want to leave in the night? You leave. No one's keeping you here." Caleb stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Ethan grabbed the extra blanket from the wardrobe and made himself a rough bed on the floor. He'd slept in worse places. Under wagons, in mud, in snow that froze your eyebrows solid. This was luxury by comparison. Caleb washed his face and hands in the basin, then climbed into bed fully clothed, like he didn't trust this enough to get comfortable. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed him, and his breathing evened into sleep. Ethan lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't planned on this. Hadn't planned on getting involved in some kid's tragedy. He had his own ranch to get back to, his own life to live. Alone. Simple. Uncomplicated. But when he closed his eyes, all he saw was that whisper in the dust. Nobody cares. He'd said those same words once, had believed them with every fiber of his being. It had taken one person, just one, to prove him wrong. Old Henry Blackwood, the rancher who'd found a half-dead 15-year-old Ethan wandering the trail after his own parents' wagon had been raided. Henry hadn't asked questions, hadn't demanded explanations. He'd just said, "You'll work, you'll eat, you'll live. The rest we'll figure out as we go." Henry had been dead 5 years now, and Ethan ran the ranch Henry had left him, built it bigger, made it profitable, lived there alone because that was easier than risking anyone else. But tonight, in this cramped hotel room, watching a broken boy sleep, Ethan felt the weight of what Henry had given him. Not just land, not just opportunity, a second chance. Can you do this? He asked himself. Can you be that person for someone else? The question haunted him into an uneasy sleep. Morning came with bright Texas sun and the sounds of the town waking up. Ethan woke first, muscles stiff from the floor, and found Caleb still asleep, curled tight in a ball like he expected someone to kick him. Ethan ordered breakfast sent up, eggs, bacon, biscuits, milk. When the smell of food filled the room, Caleb stirred, eyes flying open with the panicked look of someone who'd forgotten where they were. "Easy," Ethan said. "Just breakfast." Recognition dawned, followed by confusion. "You're still here." "Said I would be, didn't I?" Caleb sat up slowly, eyeing the food. "Most people lie." "I don't." They ate together, quieter this time, the desperate edge of last night's hunger replaced by something more careful. After breakfast, Ethan leaned back in his chair and studied the boy. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what comes next." Caleb's face shuddered immediately. "I can manage on my own." "Didn't say you couldn't, but managing and living are two different things." Ethan paused, weighing his words. "I've got a ranch about 3 days' ride northwest of here. It's remote, hard work, but there's food, shelter, and I could use someone to help with chores." Caleb's eyes went wide. "You offering me work?" "I'm offering you a place. The work comes with it, but fair work. Nothing you can't handle." "Why?" The question was almost a plea. "Why would you do that?" Ethan met his gaze steadily. "Because someone did it for me once, and because you remind me of myself at your age, too proud to beg, too stubborn to die, too young to be alone." "What if I steal from you? What if I run off? What if—" "Then you do," Ethan interrupted, "but you'll do it with a full belly and a decent pair of boots." "I'm not asking you to sign your life over, Caleb. I'm just offering you today. Tomorrow you can decide if you want the day after that." The boy's throat worked, emotions flickering across his face too fast to name. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You work, you eat, you have a bed. You don't work? Same deal. But I expect honesty. You want to leave? You tell me. You have a problem? You tell me. You don't have to stay, but while you're there, we treat each other straight. Deal?" Caleb studied him with old eyes. Finally, he whispered, "Deal." Ethan extended his hand again. This time, Caleb shook it without hesitation. "All right then, first order of business, we get you some proper clothes and boots. Can't have you walking 3 days barefoot." They left the hotel together, heading for the general store. The morning was already heating up, merchants opening their shops, women with baskets heading to market, men discussing cattle prices and weather. Normal life. The kind Caleb had been locked out of for too long. At Murphy's general store, the same woman who'd chased Caleb with a broom yesterday looked up from her counter. Her face pinched immediately. "Out," she snapped. "I told you yesterday." "He's with me," Ethan said calmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And we're here to buy clothes, boots, and whatever else he needs. Unless you'd prefer we take our business elsewhere?" Mrs. Murphy's eyes went to Ethan's dusty but quality clothes, his gun belt, the quiet confidence of a man who knew his worth. Money talked, even to prejudice. "Fine," she said sourly, "but I'm watching him." "You do that." Ethan guided Caleb to the back of the store where clothing hung on hooks. He selected sturdy trousers, 2 shirts, a light jacket, socks, and a wide-brimmed hat. Then boots, real leather boots that actually fit. Caleb touched each item like it might vanish. This is too much. It's what you need. Go try them on." In the small changing room, Caleb stripped off his rags and pulled on the new clothes. When he emerged, he looked different. Still thin, still bruised, but human. Visible. Worth noticing. Ethan nodded approval. Better. Keep the old clothes if you want, or leave them. Leave them, Caleb said immediately. They added a bedroll, a canteen, and some basic supplies to the pile. Mrs. Murphy tallied everything with barely concealed resentment, and Ethan paid without comment. As they left, Caleb walked taller, the new boots making solid sounds on the boardwalk. Never had new boots before, he admitted quietly. Well, you've got them now. Try not to outgrow them too fast. The hint of a smile touched Caleb's face, small, tentative, but real. They were heading back to the hotel to collect Ethan's gear when a woman's voice called out, sharp with urgency. Caleb? Caleb Reed, is that you? Both of them turned. A woman hurried toward them, skirt swirling dust, her face flushed with heat and worry. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple dress that had seen better days. Her eyes were intelligent, fierce, and currently locked on Caleb with relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. Miss Bennett? Caleb's voice cracked with surprise. The woman, Miss Bennett, dropped to her knees right there in the street, ignoring propriety, and gripped Caleb's shoulders. Thank God. I've been looking everywhere for you. When you disappeared from the schoolyard, I thought... Her voice broke. I thought something terrible had happened. Caleb stiffened under her hands but didn't pull away. I left. After what happened, I just couldn't stay. I know, she whispered. I know, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry. Ethan cleared his throat. Ma'am, I don't mean to interrupt, but perhaps we should step out of the street? Miss Bennett looked up at him, seeming to notice him for the first time. Her eyes went wary, protective. And you are? Ethan Cole. I found Caleb last night, gave him a meal and a bed. Just gave. Her tone suggested she'd heard that story before and knew how it usually ended. Just gave, Ethan confirmed. No strings, no conditions. She studied him the way you'd study a horse you weren't sure you could trust. Finally, she stood, keeping one hand on Caleb's shoulder. Clara Bennett. I was Caleb's teacher. Was, because I've been dismissed. Dismissed? For protecting him. Her voice was bitter. Though the official reason was inappropriate conduct and insubordination. Caleb spoke up, urgent. Mr. Pritchard was hurting me, Miss Bennett. You saw it. You stopped him, and they fired you for it. Clara's hand tightened on his shoulder. And I'd do it again. But that doesn't change our current situation. Ethan looked between them, pieces clicking together. What happened? Clara's jaw set. Mr. James Pritchard, one of the town's fine, upstanding citizens, decided Caleb needed to be taught a lesson for asking for food outside his store. He dragged the child into the schoolyard and started beating him with his belt. I intervened, physically. The school board felt I'd overstepped my authority and dismissed me immediately. They took his side? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. They always take the side of money and power. I'm a woman. Unmarried. No family here. Caleb is... She looked down at the boy with infinite sadness. No one. So yes, they took his side. Caleb's face had gone pale, memories clearly haunting him. I'm sorry, Miss Bennett. You lost your job because of me. No, Clara said firmly. I lost my job because I chose decency over compliance. That's not on you, Caleb. That's on them. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Here was another person willing to sacrifice for this child. Another person who saw him as worth saving. Where are you staying, Miss Bennett? She hesitated. The boarding house. For now, though my savings won't last long. And Caleb? What was your plan for him? Her eyes met his, and he saw the truth there. Hope wrestling with hopelessness. I've been trying to find him since he ran. I don't know what I thought, that I could help somehow, but I have no job, limited resources, and no legal claim to him. I can't... Her voice cracked. I can't protect him the way he needs. Caleb's face crumpled. It's okay, Miss Bennett. I know you tried. I'll be fine on my own. No, Ethan said, the word cutting through like an axe. Both of them looked at him. You won't be on your own. He took a breath, making a decision that would change everything. I've offered Caleb a place at my ranch. Work, shelter, food. It's 3 days northwest, remote but stable. The offer stands. Clara's eyes widened. You're taking him in? Just like that? Just like that. And you expect me to just hand him over to a stranger? No, Ethan said calmly. I expect you to ask questions, check my character, and make sure I'm not some monster. That's what a smart woman would do. And you strike me as very smart, Miss Bennett. She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Yes, I do need to know more. Fair enough. Let's find somewhere to sit, and I'll tell you whatever you need to know. They settled in the hotel restaurant, ordering coffee while Ethan laid out his history. He told them about his childhood, his parents' death, being found by Henry Blackwood. He described the ranch, the work, the isolation. He didn't prettify it or make promises he couldn't keep. It's not easy, he finished, and it's not for everyone, but it's honest. And I mean what I said. No conditions, no strings. Caleb wants to leave, he leaves. Clara listened intently, asking sharp questions about his finances, his character references, his plans. Finally, she leaned back, studying him. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for a child you don't know? Ethan met her eyes. Because someone did it for me, and because walking away from him would make me the kind of man I don't want to be. Silence stretched between them. Then Clara turned to Caleb. What do you want, sweetheart? This has to be your choice. Caleb looked between them, then down at his new boots. When he spoke, his voice was small but steady. I want to go with Mr. Cole. He swallowed hard. I want to try. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Then you should. But as she said it, Ethan saw something else in her face. Grief. Loss. The knowledge that she was losing this child she'd tried to protect, and there was nothing she could do about it. An idea formed. Reckless. Complicated. Probably foolish. He spoke before he could think better of it. Come with us. Both Clara and Caleb stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Excuse me? Clara managed. Come with us. To the ranch. You've got no job here, limited prospects, and clearly you care about Caleb's welfare. I've got space, work that needs doing, and... He hesitated. And it might be easier, for him, having someone he already trusts. Clara's face flushed. Mr. Cole, I appreciate the offer, but I can't just... The impropriety alone. I've got a main house and a separate cabin. You'd have your own space, your own door. And before you worry about reputation, understand, I'm 3 days from the nearest town and I don't give a damn what people think. If you're worried about your safety, ask around. Check my references. I'll wait. She stood abruptly. I need to think. I need to think. Take your time. We're not leaving until tomorrow morning. Clara nodded shakily and left, moving fast like she needed to outrun the decision. Caleb watched her go, then looked at Ethan with something like awe. You really asked her to come? I did. Why? Ethan smiled slightly. Because you trust her. And because she stood up for you when no one else would. That counts for something. That night, Ethan lay awake again, wondering if he'd completely lost his mind. Offering shelter to one orphan was one thing. Offering it to a destitute woman as well, inviting questions, complications, difficulties. But when he thought about Clara's fierce protection of Caleb, the way she'd sacrificed her livelihood without hesitation, people like that were rare, worth taking a risk on. The knock on his door came near midnight. Ethan opened it to find Clara standing in the hallway, still dressed, clearly sleepless. I need to know, she said without preamble. What exactly are you offering me? Employment? Charity? Something else? Ethan leaned against the doorframe. Honest work. I need someone who can cook, manage a household, help with ranch accounts. I can pay a fair wage. Not much, but enough. You'd have your own cabin, your independence. If it doesn't work out, I'll arrange transport back to town. No questions asked. And Caleb? Would have someone he trusts. Someone who cares about him. Her eyes searched his face. You're not married? No wife at this ranch? No wife? Never married. And you're not, she paused delicately, you're not looking for companionship beyond the practical? No, ma'am. I'm offering work, shelter, and safety. Nothing more. She studied him for a long moment, then quietly, I checked with the sheriff, the bank manager, and the livery owner. They all spoke highly of you, said you're honest, pay your debts, and keep your word. And? Clara took a deep breath. And I'm coming with you. Not because I trust easily. I don't. But because I can't protect Caleb here and I won't abandon him. If there's even a chance this could work. There is, Ethan said. I'll make sure of it. She nodded once, sharply. Tomorrow morning, then. Tomorrow morning. As she walked away, Ethan closed the door and sat on the bed, looking at Caleb's sleeping form. What have you gotten yourself into, Cole? He asked himself. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the worry and the doubt, there was something else. Purpose. For the first time in 5 years, his life felt like it meant something beyond just surviving. And that was worth the risk. They left San Angelo at dawn, 3 figures on horseback moving through the pale gold light that turned the Texas landscape into something almost beautiful. Ethan rode in front on his roan gelding, Caleb sat behind him holding tight to his waist, and Clara followed on a gentle mare Ethan had purchased that morning, another expense he hadn't planned, but didn't regret. The first hours passed in near silence, broken only by the creak of leather, the soft thud of hooves on packed earth, and the occasional call of a hawk overhead. Caleb's grip around Ethan's middle was fierce at first, terrified, but gradually loosened as the miles stretched behind them and nothing bad happened. Clara rode with her back straight, chin up, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned the horizon like she expected disaster to come riding out of the mesquite. He understood. She'd gambled everything on the word of a stranger. Trust didn't come easy when life had taught you better. By midday, the heat pressed down like a wool blanket. Ethan led them to a creek he knew, a thin ribbon of water cutting through red rock and scrub oak. They dismounted stiffly, muscles already protesting the long ride. We'll rest here an hour, Ethan said, loosening his horse's girth. Water the horses, eat something, stretch your legs. Clara helped Caleb down, steadying him when his legs wobbled. The boy had never ridden this long before, and it showed. She pulled food from her saddlebag, bread, cheese, dried apples she'd bought that morning, and handed portions to both of them. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood, eating in that same careful silence. Finally, Clara spoke. How much farther? 2.5 days if the weather holds. We'll camp tonight, reach Thornton's way station tomorrow evening, then make the ranch by late afternoon the day after. She nodded, absorbing this. And your ranch? How big is it? About 800 acres. Not massive, but good grazing land. I run about 200 head of cattle, some horses. There's the main house, the cabin I mentioned, a barn, stable, and a few outbuildings. Do you have help? Other workers? Had a hand named Jim Tucker until last month. He took a job farther north, better pay. Been managing alone since, but it's tight. That's part of why. He glanced at Caleb. Extra hands, even young ones, make a difference. Caleb perked up at that. What kind of work would I do? Feeding livestock, mucking stalls, mending fence, hauling water, basic ranch chores. Nothing dangerous at first. You'll learn as you go. I'm a fast learner, Caleb said quickly, almost defensively. I won't slow you down. Didn't say you would, but you're also 10 years old and half-starved. We'll start slow, build you up proper. Clara studied Ethan with those sharp eyes. And what would my work entail exactly? Cooking, mostly. Laundry, keeping the house from turning into a complete disaster. I can handle accounts and paperwork, but if you've got a head for numbers, that'd be useful too. The cabin needs some fixing up. Hasn't been lived in for a while, but it's sound. 4 walls, a roof, a stove. And you'd pay me for this work? $20 a month plus room and board. It's not rich wages, but it's fair. He saw her calculate quickly. $20 was modest but respectable for a housekeeper in remote country. More importantly, it was independence. All right, she said. That's acceptable. They finished eating and rested in the shade while the worst heat passed. Caleb fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from the ride and the previous day's stress. Clara watched him sleep with such tenderness that Ethan had to look away. "He's been through hell," she said quietly. "I gathered." His uncle didn't just beat him. He starved him, worked him like a mule, blamed him for everything wrong in his miserable life. When Caleb showed up at school with fresh bruises, I reported it to the sheriff. You know what he said? Ethan could guess, but he let her tell it. He said boys need discipline, that I was interfering in family matters, and if I kept making trouble, I'd lose my position. Her laugh was bitter. Turns out he was right about that last part. You did the right thing. Did I? I lost my job. Caleb lost the one place he felt safe, and his uncles probably already found some other child to torment. You stood up when no one else would. That matters. She met his eyes. Does it? Or does it just make me foolish? Ethan thought about Henry Blackwood, about the choice that had saved his life. World's got enough people who look away. It needs more who don't. Clara held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. I hope you're right. They rode on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually shifting from scrub plains to rolling hills dotted with juniper and oak. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air thick and heavy. Caleb dozed against Ethan's back, trusting enough now to sleep in the saddle. As evening approached, Ethan guided them to a camping spot he'd used before. A natural depression in the land with a windbreak of rocks and access to a small spring. He'd camped here dozens of times over the years, and it felt almost like home. They set up camp efficiently. Ethan tended the horses while Clara gathered firewood and Caleb helped clear a spot for the fire. The boy moved carefully, every action measured, like he was afraid of doing something wrong. You're doing fine, Ethan told him. Just pile the rocks here in a circle. Keeps the fire contained. Caleb nodded and worked with intense concentration, arranging each rock just so. When he finished, he looked up at Ethan with hope naked on his face, waiting for approval. Good work. Now help Miss Bennett with the kindling. The smile that broke across Caleb's face was like sunrise. They ate beans and bacon cooked over the fire, washing it down with coffee for the adults and water for Caleb. As darkness fell, stars emerged in impossible numbers, the kind of sky you only saw far from town lights. Caleb stared upward, transfixed. I forgot how many there were. Easy to forget in town, Clara said softly. All those lamps and lanterns. Out here, you remember how small we are. My pa used to point out constellations, Caleb said, his voice distant, before he died. He knew all their names, all the stories. You remember any? Ethan asked. Caleb pointed. That's the Big Dipper, and Orion's over there. See the belt? I see it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Clara stood and brushed off her skirt. I should sleep. Long day tomorrow. Ethan had laid out bedrolls in a triangle around the fire, far enough apart for propriety, close enough for safety. Clara settled into hers, back turned to the men, trusting but cautious. Caleb crawled into his own bedroll, but his eyes stayed open, watching the flames. Can't sleep? Ethan asked. Thinking. About? What if it doesn't work? What if I mess up and you send me back? Ethan poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. Caleb, you listening? Yes, sir. I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for honest. You mess up, we fix it. You have questions, you ask. You're scared, you say so. The only way you fail is if you lie or run without talking to me first. Understand? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Nobody ever said that to me before. Well, I'm saying it now. Mr. Cole? Yeah? Thank you for everything. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Get some sleep, son. The words slipped out naturally, unconsciously. Ethan didn't even notice, but Caleb did. The boy's eyes went wide in the firelight, and his lips moved silently, tasting the word. Son. Then he rolled over, pulled his blanket up to his chin, and fell asleep with something like peace on his face. Ethan sat watch first, listening to the night sounds. Crickets, a distant coyote, the soft breathing of his unlikely companions. He'd expected to feel burdened by this responsibility, but instead he felt purposeful. Like pieces of his life that hadn't fit before were suddenly clicking into place. When he finally slept, He dreamed of the ranch, but it wasn't empty anymore. They woke to a sky streaked with pink and orange, the air still cool before the heat returned. Clara had bread and preserves for breakfast, simple but good. Caleb ate quickly, eager to get moving, some of his wariness replaced by cautious excitement. The second day's ride was harder. The terrain grew rougher, the trail less defined. They climbed through rocky passes where the horses picked their way carefully over loose stone. Caleb's inexperience showed. He was sore and stiff, trying not to complain but clearly hurting. They stopped frequently to rest, and during one break, Ethan showed Caleb how to check the horse's hooves for stones, how to read the landscape for water, how to spot the signs of animal trails. "You're teaching him," Clara observed, watching them work together. "He's learning. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Teaching implies I've got some grand plan. This is just passing along what I know." "That's what teaching is, Mr. Cole." He glanced at her. "You can call me Ethan." "Mr. Cole makes me feel old." A smile ghosted across her face. "Ethan, then, and you should call me Clara." "Clara it is." By late afternoon, they spotted the way station, a rough collection of buildings huddled against the base of a mesa. Thornton's place was more trading post than hotel, but it offered beds, hot food, and shelter. The owner, a grizzled man named Pete Thornton, greeted Ethan with genuine pleasure. "Cole, haven't seen you in months. Heard you were running that spread solo now." "Was. Brought some help." Ethan gestured to Clara and Caleb. "They'll need a room. I'll take my usual." Pete's eyes went shrewd, taking in the trio with interest, but he knew better than to ask questions. "Got a room for the lady and boy. Supper's in an hour." The room Pete showed Clara and Caleb was small but clean, with 2 narrow beds and a washstand. Clara sank onto one bed with a sigh of relief. "I'd forgotten how much riding can hurt," she admitted. Caleb flopped onto the other bed, groaning. "Everything hurts." "Welcome to ranch life," Ethan said from the doorway. "It gets easier. Your muscles adjust." "When?" Caleb asked plaintively. "Eventually." Ethan smiled. "Clean up, rest a bit. I'll come get you for supper." He left them to it and went to check on the horses, making sure they were properly cooled down, watered, and fed. Pete joined him in the stable, leaning against a post. "So," Pete said casually, "you bringing home a ready-made family, or is there a story I'm missing?" "There's a story, and it's none of your business," Pete laughed. "Fair enough, but folks are going to talk when you ride in with a woman and a kid. Let them talk. I stopped caring what folks thought a long time ago." "That right?" Pete studied him. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who just started caring about something, or someone." Ethan didn't answer that. Didn't need to. Supper was venison stew, cornbread, and coffee. The way station's common room was crowded with travelers, cowboys heading to new ranches, a family moving west, a few drifters. Clara sat close to Caleb, her body language protective, and Ethan positioned himself between them and the rest of the room. One of the drifters, a hard-faced man with whiskey on his breath, kept staring at Clara. When she got up to refill Caleb's water, the man shifted his chair, deliberately blocking her path. "Evening, ma'am. Traveling alone?" "With companions," Clara said coolly. "That's so. Wondered if you might need better company." Ethan stood, his movement casual, but his intent clear. "The lady's fine." The drifter looked up, sizing Ethan up. Whatever he saw in Ethan's eyes made him think better of pushing further. "Didn't mean no harm." "I'm sure you didn't." Ethan's tone said the opposite. The man returned to his table, and Clara hurried back to her seat, face flushed. "Thank you." "Don't mention it." But Caleb had noticed the exchange, and his young face had gone hard. "That man was bothering Miss Bennett." "And now he's not," Ethan said calmly. "Some folks need reminding about manners. Most back down when reminded. And if they don't, then you handle it. But you handle it smart, not angry." They finished their meal in peace and retired early. Ethan lay in his own small room, listening to the sounds of the way station settling for the night. Tomorrow they'd reach the ranch, and this strange journey would end. Or maybe, he thought, it would begin. The final day dawned clear and bright. They left Thornton's place at first light, and Caleb was noticeably more comfortable in the saddle, his body adapting. The landscape shifted again, becoming greener, more lush. They were entering the valley where Ethan's ranch sat, protected by hills on three sides and watered by a creek that ran year-round. As they crested the final rise, Ethan reined in his horse and pointed. There. Below them, the ranch spread out in the afternoon light. The main house was simple but solid, wood and stone, with a wide porch and a chimney. The barn stood to the left, weathered but sturdy. Beyond it, the cabin Clara would occupy sat near a stand of cottonwoods. Cattle dotted the meadows and horses grazed in the near pasture. It wasn't grand. It wasn't fancy. But it was home. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed. Caleb said nothing, but his eyes were wide, taking in everything, the space, the green, the sense of permanence. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, Ethan felt the weight of what he'd done settle on his shoulders. He'd brought these people here, promised them safety and purpose. Now he had to deliver. He helped Clara and Caleb dismount, then began unsaddling the horses. "I'll get these settled, then show you around." Clara stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Ethan, before we go further, I need to say something." He turned, meeting her eyes. "I don't know how this will work. I don't know if we're making a mistake or taking the smartest risk of our lives. But I want you to know, I see what you're trying to do. For Caleb. For me. And I'll work harder than you can imagine to make sure you don't regret it." "I won't regret it," Ethan said. "How can you be sure?" "Because I already know what regret feels like. This isn't it." She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded and turned to help Caleb carry their meager belongings toward the house. Ethan finished with the horses and led them on a tour. The main house had 3 rooms, a large main area with kitchen and sitting space, a bedroom, and a small study. It was sparse but functional, the home of a man who lived alone and didn't see the point in decoration. "I'll sleep in the study," Ethan said. "You and Caleb can share the bedroom until we get the cabin fixed up." Clara started to protest, but he cut her off. "It's settled. I've slept in worse places." The cabin was in rougher shape than he'd remembered. The roof needed patching, the stove needed cleaning, and the whole place had the musty smell of disuse. But the bones were good. "Give me a few days," Ethan said. "I'll make it livable." "We'll help," Clara said firmly. "All of us." And they did. Over the next 3 days, the 3 of them worked side by side, transforming the cabin from abandoned shelter to home. Ethan repaired the roof while Clara scrubbed every surface and Caleb hauled water and carried supplies. They worked from dawn to dusk, falling into bed exhausted but satisfied. Slowly, Caleb began to relax. He still moved carefully, still watched for danger, but the rigid fear started to ease. He learned to feed the chickens, collect eggs, help Clara with washing. Ethan showed him how to curry the horses, check fences, recognize when a cow was in distress. The boy absorbed everything like parched ground soaking up rain, and every night at supper he'd recount what he'd learned, his voice growing more confident with each passing day. Clara blossomed too. She brought order to the chaos of Ethan's household, cooking meals that were actually planned rather than thrown together, organizing supplies, even starting a small garden near the cabin. Her laughter, rare at first, became more frequent. Ethan found himself watching them work, these 2 lost souls who'd somehow become part of his life, and feeling something he hadn't felt in years: contentment. One evening, about a week after their arrival, Ethan sat on the porch watching the sunset while Clara and Caleb finished cleaning up from supper. The door opened and Caleb came out, hesitating. "Mr. Cole, can I ask you something?" "Sure." The boy sat beside him, legs dangling off the porch. "How long can we stay?" "Long as you want." "What if I mess up? What if I break something or—" "Caleb." Ethan waited until the boy looked at him. "You're not on trial here. This is your home now, if you want it to be. You'll make mistakes. Everyone does. That's how you learn. But mistakes don't mean you lose your place here. Understand?" Caleb's throat worked. "Nobody ever said I could stay before. They always said, 'for now,' or 'until,' or 'as long as you behave.' There was always a catch." "No catch. Just one rule." "What?" "Be honest with me. That's it. That's all I ask. Caleb nodded slowly, then in a rush, I want to stay. I want this to be home. I'll work hard, I promise. I know you will. And it already is home. You just needed to hear me say it. The boy's eyes filled with tears he tried desperately to hide. Ethan put an arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. Caleb held himself stiff for just a moment, then collapsed against Ethan's side and let himself cry, deep, wrenching sobs that carried years of fear and loneliness and pain. Ethan held him through it, not speaking, just being present. Inside the house, he could see Clara watching through the window, her own eyes bright with tears. When Caleb finally quieted, Ethan handed him a handkerchief. Better? Yeah. Caleb wiped his face. Sorry. Nothing to be sorry for. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Finally, Caleb spoke again, his voice small but steady. Can I call you Pa? Ethan's breath caught. He looked at this boy who'd been beaten down by life, who'd lost everything, who'd learned not to hope, and who was now brave enough to ask for what he needed. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. Yeah, you can call me Pa. Caleb smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Okay. Pa. The word hung between them, new and fragile and perfect. Inside, Clara turned away from the window, her hand pressed to her mouth. She'd seen the exchange, understood what it meant. This broken child was healing, and the man who'd seemed so alone was becoming a father. She'd gambled everything on a stranger's word, and somehow, impossibly, she'd chosen right. Later that night, after Caleb had gone to bed in the main house and Ethan had retired to his study, Clara stood in her cabin doorway looking at the ranch bathed in moonlight. The work was hard, the future uncertain, but for the first time since losing her teaching position, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Fences to mend, cattle to tend, a household to manage. But tonight, under the vast Texas sky, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd all found what they'd been searching for. A place to belong. The first real test came 3 weeks after their arrival, on a morning that started like any other. Ethan was out checking the north fence line when he heard the commotion, cattle bawling in distress, hooves thundering, and underneath it all, a sound that made his blood run cold. A child screaming. He spurred his horse into a gallop, heart hammering against his ribs. The scene that met him turned his stomach. A cow had gotten separated from the herd during calving and was now trapped in a ravine, her newborn calf beside her. And halfway down the slope, clinging to a scrub oak with both hands, was Caleb. Don't move, Ethan shouted, swinging down from his saddle. Just hold on. I'm slipping. Caleb's voice was pure terror. His feet scrabbled against loose rock, sending stones cascading down into the ravine below. Ethan assessed the situation fast. The slope was steep, unstable, and if Caleb fell, he'd tumble 30 feet onto rocks that would break bones or worse. Moving carefully, Ethan started down, testing each foothold before committing his weight. What happened? He called, keeping his voice calm despite the fear clawing at his throat. The calf was crying. I thought I could help. I didn't know the ground would give way. All right, we'll fix it. Just keep holding that branch. Ethan worked his way closer, inch by careful inch. Sweat ran into his eyes despite the morning cool. Finally, he was within reach. He braced himself against a boulder and extended his hand. Grab my wrist. When I say move, you let go of the branch and swing toward me. I've got you. Caleb's face was white with fear, but he nodded. Okay? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Caleb let go and lunged. Ethan caught his wrist in an iron grip, taking the full weight of the boy as momentum swung him forward. For one heart-stopping moment, Ethan's own footing started to slip. Then he found purchase, pulled hard, and hauled Caleb up against his chest. I've got you. I've got you. They stayed like that for a moment, both breathing hard, before Ethan carefully climbed back up the slope, with Caleb clinging to him like a burr. At the top, they collapsed on solid ground. You hurt? Ethan demanded, running his hands over Caleb's arms and legs, checking for injuries. No, just scared. Caleb's voice shook. I'm sorry. I was stupid. I just wanted to help and... Stop. Ethan gripped his shoulders. You're not stupid. You saw something in trouble and tried to help. That's not stupid. It's kind. But kind doesn't matter if you're dead, you understand? Caleb nodded miserably. Next time you see something dangerous, you come get me. Always. No matter what. Promise? I promise. Ethan pulled him into a brief, fierce hug, then released him. Good. Now let's get that cow and calf out of there before something else goes wrong. They worked together for the next hour, rigging a rope system to help the cow climb out of the ravine. The calf, still unsteady on new legs, followed its mother with Caleb guiding it gently. By the time they got both animals back to the herd, they were filthy, exhausted, and oddly triumphant. Clara met them at the barn, took one look at their condition, and went pale. What happened? Rescue operation, Ethan said. Successful, but messy. She listened to the story with growing alarm, her eyes never leaving Caleb. When Ethan finished, she turned to the boy. You could have died. But I didn't, Caleb said quietly. Pa saved me. The casual use of pa made Clara's expression soften despite her fear. She knelt in front of Caleb, taking his dirty hands in hers. I know you wanted to help. That speaks to who you are, and I'm proud of you for that. But Caleb, sweetheart, you can't take those kinds of risks. We just found you. We can't lose you. Her voice broke on the last word, and Caleb's eyes went wide. You really care that much? Of course we do. You're family now. Caleb threw his arms around her neck, and Clara held him tight, her face buried in his hair. Over the boy's shoulder, her eyes met Ethan's, and something passed between them, a shared understanding of what they'd almost lost and what they were building together. That evening, after Caleb had gone to bed, Ethan found Clara sitting on her cabin porch, wrapped in a shawl against the cooling air. He hesitated, then sat beside her. He's all right, Ethan said. Kids are resilient. I know, but when I think about what could have happened, she shuddered. I've only known him a few months, but the thought of losing him, you won't. He's learning. Today taught him something important. What's that? That actions have consequences, and that we care enough to be scared for him. Ethan paused. That's new for him. Having people who care. Clara nodded slowly. It's new for me too. Caring this much. I thought when I lost my teaching position, I'd lost my purpose. But this, she gestured at the ranch, the house, the life they were building. This matters more than I expected. You matter here, Ethan said quietly. Both of you. I want you to know that. She looked at him, studying his face in the lamplight spilling from the cabin window. You've changed our lives, Ethan. I hope you know what a gift that is. You've changed mine too. The words hung between them, carrying weight neither was quite ready to examine. Finally, Clara stood, wrapping the shawl tighter. I should sleep. Tomorrow's wash day. Clara? She turned back. Thank you for being here, for caring about him. A soft smile touched her lips. Thank you for giving us a reason to. As autumn deepened, their routine solidified into something that felt almost normal. Ethan taught Caleb ranch skills with patient persistence, how to rope a calf, how to read weather signs, how to treat a horse's thrush. The boy absorbed it all with fierce concentration, determined to prove his worth. Clara transformed the cabin into a real home, hanging curtains she'd sewn from feed sacks, arranging wildflowers in a chipped vase, creating small touches of beauty in the rough country. She started teaching Caleb lessons in the evenings, reading, writing, arithmetic, and Ethan often found himself listening from the porch, drawn by the sound of her patient voice explaining long division or historical events. One evening, Clara looked up from the book they were reading and caught Ethan watching from the doorway. You're welcome to join us, she said. We're reading about the Revolutionary War. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I'm not much for books. Can you read? Well enough, just never saw the point in reading for pleasure. Clara's eyebrows rose. Never? Not even as a child? Didn't have much opportunity, and after my folks died, I was too busy surviving to worry about stories. Something shifted in her expression, not pity exactly, but understanding. Then perhaps it's time you discovered what you've been missing. Caleb, start from the beginning of the chapter. Caleb began reading aloud, his voice steady and clear. a far cry from the frightened whisper of the boy in San Angelo. As he read about battles and revolution, about people fighting for something bigger than themselves, Ethan found himself caught up in the narrative despite his skepticism. When Caleb finished, Clara asked questions that made him think deeper about what he'd read. Why did people fight? What would you sacrifice for freedom? When is rebellion justified? What do you think, Ethan? Clara asked suddenly. He blinked. About what? About whether the colonists were right to rebel. You've lived under different rules than they did, but surely you faced moments where you had to choose between obedience and what you knew was right. Ethan thought about the moment he'd seen Caleb in that alley, about Clara standing up to protect a child at the cost of her livelihood. Sometimes following the rules means letting wrong things happen. Sometimes breaking them is the only decent choice. Even when it costs you? Clara pressed. Especially then. Because if you won't pay the cost, you're saying the rules matter more than people. And that's how you end up with the kind of world where a kid can be beaten and starved and nobody stops it because it's not their business. Silence fell. Caleb was staring at him with something like awe, and Clara's eyes had gone soft. That, she said quietly, is exactly the kind of thinking that built this country, and exactly the kind we need to preserve it. The lessons became a nightly ritual after that. Sometimes they read history or literature. Sometimes Clara taught mathematics while Ethan worked on account books nearby, occasionally asking questions that showed he was paying more attention than he let on. Sometimes they just talked, 3 people building trust one conversation at a time. The season turned colder, and with it came new challenges. Ethan needed to get cattle to market before winter set in, which meant a week-long drive to the railhead in Denison. He'd done it alone before, but this year felt different. I hate leaving you both, he admitted the night before departure. Clara looked up from the sock she was darning. We'll manage. It's only a week. A lot can happen in a week. And we'll handle it. Ethan, we're not helpless. I've been managing households since I was 16, and Caleb is stronger than he looks. Caleb nodded vigorously. I can take care of things, Pa. I'll feed the stock, check the fences, help Miss Bennett with anything she needs. I know you will. But if anything goes wrong, anything at all, you ride to Thornton's place and send word. Don't try to handle it alone. We won't, Clara promised. Now go. The sooner you leave, the sooner you're back. Ethan left at dawn, driving 20 head of cattle toward market. The work was familiar, almost meditative, but his mind kept drifting back to the ranch. Were they managing? Was Caleb handling the chores? Was Clara safe in that isolated cabin? He pushed the cattle hard, making better time than usual, driven by an urgency he couldn't quite name. The sale went smoothly, good prices, no complications. He collected his payment and started back the next morning, a full day earlier than planned. Meanwhile, at the ranch, Clara and Caleb had fallen into their own rhythm. The boy had taken his responsibilities seriously, rising before dawn to feed the animals, checking water troughs, doing his best to handle the work Ethan usually managed. But on the 5th day, Clara woke to find Caleb feverish and shaking. The boy had been fighting a cold for days, insisting he was fine, but overnight it had turned into something worse. I'm okay, Caleb mumbled, trying to get out of bed. Gotta feed the horses. You're not going anywhere, Clara said firmly, pressing a hand to his burning forehead. Back in bed. Now. She spent the day trying everything she knew, cool compresses, willow bark tea, keeping him hydrated. But by evening, Caleb's fever had climbed higher, and he'd started coughing so hard it shook his whole body. Clara paced the cabin, fear coiling in her stomach. Should she ride for help? But leaving Caleb alone in his condition was unthinkable. Should she wait? Hope it broke on its own? But what if it got worse? She was still debating when she heard hoofbeats. Relief flooded through her as she rushed to the door, expecting Ethan. But it wasn't Ethan. 3 men on horseback rode into the yard, rough-looking and trail-worn. The one in front had a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and eyes that cataloged everything they saw with calculated interest. Clara stepped onto the porch, keeping her spine straight despite the fear crawling up her throat. Can I help you, gentlemen? The scarred man smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Well, now that depends. This the Cole Ranch? It is, Mr. Cole is away on business. If you're looking for work, you'll need to come back next week. We're not looking for work, ma'am, just passing through. Thought we might water our horses, maybe get a meal if you're feeling charitable. Every instinct Clara possessed screamed danger, but refusing outright might provoke them. You can water your horses at the trough. As for food, I'm afraid I have a sick child to tend, perhaps at Thornton's way station, about 15 miles east. Sick child? The man's eyes sharpened. That's unfortunate. Anything serious? A fever. Nothing contagious, but I really must get back to him. The man dismounted, and the other two followed suit. We'll just water the horses then. Wouldn't want to impose, but they didn't move toward the trough. They spread out, casual but deliberate, cutting off escape routes. Clara's hand found the door frame, steadying herself. The trough is there, she said, pointing. Help yourselves. The scarred man stepped closer. You know, it's dangerous, a woman alone out here. All kinds of trouble could find you. I'm not alone. Your husband is driving cattle to Denison. We passed him on the trail yesterday. The man's smile widened. So unless he grew wings and flew back, you're very much alone, except for that sick kid. Clara's heart hammered. Her hand moved slowly, carefully, to the rifle she'd propped beside the door that morning. I'll ask you once more to water your horses and leave. After that, I stop asking. The man laughed. And you threatening us? That's adorable. She brought the rifle up in one smooth motion, leveling it at his chest. Her hands didn't shake. It's not a threat. It's a promise. Leave. Now. For a moment, everything hung in balance. The men tensed, hands drifting toward their own weapons. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger, knowing she'd have one shot before they rushed her, knowing it might not be enough. Then a voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. She's not alone. All eyes swung to the barn. Ethan stood in the doorway, his rifle raised, and his face was carved from ice. He'd arrived through the back pasture, unseen, and now had a clear line of fire on all three men. You've got about 5 seconds to get on those horses and ride, Ethan said, his voice deadly calm. After that, I start shooting, and I don't miss. The scarred man's face hardened. There's 3 of us and 1 of you. 2 of us, Clara said, her rifle never wavering. And we're both on solid ground while you're standing in the open. Do the arithmetic. The man looked between them, calculating odds he didn't like. Finally, he spat in the dirt. Your hospitality needs work, Cole. And your departure needs speed. Move. The 3 men mounted up, the scarred one turning back with a last ugly smile. We'll remember this. So will I, Ethan said flatly. If I see you on my land again, I won't waste time talking. They rode out fast, dust rising behind them. Ethan kept his rifle trained on them until they disappeared over the ridge, then lowered it with a long breath. Clara's arms started shaking, the adrenaline finally hitting her. You can put the rifle down, Ethan said gently, crossing to her. They're gone. She lowered it slowly, then her legs gave out. Ethan caught her, holding her steady as reaction set in. I was so scared, she whispered. They were looking at me like, and Caleb's sick inside, and I didn't know what to do. You did exactly right. You stood your ground. He pulled back to look at her. That was brave as hell, Clara. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. He cupped her face in his hands. You protected yourself and Caleb. That's what mattered. She nodded shakily, then stiffened. Caleb, he's burning up with fever. I didn't know if I should ride for help or... Show me. They hurried inside to find Caleb tossing restlessly, his face flushed with fever. Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead and cursed under his breath. How long has he been like this? Since this morning. It was just a cold yesterday, but it got worse overnight. Ethan's mind raced through options. The nearest doctor was in Denison, a full day's ride. They could send for him, but by the time he arrived, we need to break the fever, he said. Now, you ever done a cold water treatment? Clara's eyes widened. It's dangerous if done wrong, so is letting the fever climb higher. I've done it before, but I need your help. They worked together with focused intensity. Ethan filled the tub with cold water while Clara stripped Caleb to his underclothes. The boy was barely conscious, muttering fever dreams about his uncle, about being alone, about nobody caring. "We care," Clara whispered, stroking his hair. "We're right here." They lowered him into the cold water and Caleb jerked awake with a cry. "It's freezing." "I know, son. I know it's awful, but we have to cool you down." Ethan held him steady as Caleb thrashed weakly. "Count to 60. You can do that, right? Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Caleb's teeth chattered so hard he could barely speak, but he counted. Clara counted too, her hand never leaving his shoulder. When they reached 60, they lifted him out, dried him quickly, and wrapped him in blankets. "Again in 10 minutes, Ethan said. "We need to do it 3 times. It was brutal. Each time they lowered Caleb into the cold water, he cried and begged them to stop. Each time, Ethan held him firm and counted, his voice steady even as his heart broke. And each time, Clara was there, murmuring reassurances, promising it would end soon. After the 3rd treatment, they bundled Caleb into bed. His fever had dropped, not broken but lower, and his breathing had eased. He fell into an exhausted sleep. Clara collapsed into a chair, her dress soaked, her hair coming loose from its pins. "Will he be all right?" "I think so. The fever's down enough to give his body a fighting chance." Ethan sat beside her, equally exhausted. "We'll watch him tonight. If the fever climbs again, we'll do it again." "You've done this before." "Once. A long time ago. Henry Blackwood, the man who took me in, got pneumonia. The doctor said to let him sweat it out, but Henry kept getting worse. I was terrified, but I remembered my mother treating my father this way once. It worked for Henry. Nearly gave him hypothermia, but it worked." Clara reached out and took his hand. "Thank you. For coming back early. For knowing what to do. If you hadn't—" "But I did." He squeezed her hand. "And you held your own against those men. Clara, the way you stood there with that rifle, you could have backed down, locked yourself inside, hoped they'd leave. But you didn't." "I couldn't. They might have hurt Caleb." "Exactly. You protected him. You protected yourself. That's what family does." The word hung between them. Family. Not employer and employee. Not charitable patron and grateful recipient. Family. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Is that what we are now?" "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "I think we are." They sat together in the quiet cabin, hands linked, watching Caleb sleep. Outside, night fell over the ranch, bringing cold stars and the distant call of coyotes. But inside there was warmth and something more, something that felt like belonging. Caleb's fever broke near dawn. He woke weak but clear-eyed, his forehead finally cooled to the touch. When he saw Ethan and Clara sitting beside his bed, both exhausted and rumpled from keeping vigil all night, he smiled. "You stayed." "Of course we stayed," Clara said, brushing his hair back. "Where else would we be?" "I remember the water. It was so cold. I thought—" He paused. "I thought you were hurting me." Ethan leaned forward. "I was saving you. Sometimes those feel the same." Caleb absorbed this, then nodded slowly. "I trust you. Even when it hurt, I knew you wouldn't do it unless you had to." The simple faith in those words hit Ethan like a physical blow. This child, who'd been betrayed and abandoned and beaten, still chose to trust, still believed they had his best interests at heart. "That's right," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll always do right by you, Caleb, even when it's hard, even when you don't understand. You're ours now, and we take care of our own. Like a real family." "Like a real family," Clara confirmed. Caleb's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "I like that." They nursed him back to health over the next week, feeding him broth and bread, reading to him when he grew bored with bed rest, letting him gradually resume light chores as his strength returned. The ranch work continued, cattle fed, fences mended, winter preparations made. And through it all, the 3 of them grew into something solid. Not perfect. They still argued sometimes, still made mistakes, still had moments of doubt. But underneath the rough patches was bedrock. Trust. Commitment. The kind of bond that wasn't given, but earned, one choice at a time. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, they gathered around the fireplace in the main house. Caleb had fallen asleep on the rug, wrapped in a blanket, his face peaceful in the firelight. Clara sat in the rocking chair Henry Blackwood had made years ago, mending one of Ethan's shirts. And Ethan sat nearby, supposedly working on accounts, but really just watching them both. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked softly, not looking up from her sewing. "That this is the quietest my mind has been in years." She glanced at him then, a small smile on her lips. "Good quiet or bad quiet?" "Good, definitely good." Outside, snow whispered against the windows, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, the fire crackled. Caleb's breathing was steady and deep, and Clara's needle flashed in the lamplight as she stitched torn fabric whole again. It wasn't the life any of them had planned, but it was the life they'd chosen, and that made all the difference. Winter settled over the ranch like a heavy quilt, bringing challenges that tested them in new ways. The work grew harder in the cold. Ice had to be broken on water troughs twice daily. Cattle needed extra feed, and the wind that screamed down from the mountains could freeze exposed skin in minutes. But the hardships also drew them closer together, forced cooperation turning gradually into genuine partnership. Ethan found himself noticing things he'd trained himself not to see for years. The way Clara's face lit up when she solved a problem. The sound of her humming while she cooked. The fierce intelligence in her eyes when they discussed ranch management or debated some point of history. He told himself at the beginning that this was purely practical, that he'd offered shelter for Caleb's sake, but the truth was becoming harder to ignore. He was falling in love with her. The realization hit him one evening in late December as he watched her teach Caleb to write in cursive. She had such patience, such gentleness, correcting his mistakes without making him feel stupid. And when Caleb finally wrote his full name in smooth, flowing letters, the pride on Clara's face made Ethan's chest ache. She looked up and caught him staring. "What?" "Nothing. Just thinking." "About?" "How lucky we are. That you said yes, that you're here." A blush colored her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "I'm the lucky one, Ethan. You gave me purpose when I thought I'd lost everything. You gave yourself purpose. I just offered space for it." Caleb looked between them, a knowing smile on his young face. "You two are being mushy." "Am not," Ethan protested. "Are too. You get this look when you talk to Miss Bennett, like she's special." "She is special," Ethan said simply, and Clara's blush deepened. "So are you going to marry her, or what?" The question hung in the air like gun smoke. Clara's needle froze mid-stitch. Ethan felt his own face heat, and Caleb, apparently pleased with the chaos he'd caused, grinned wickedly. "Caleb Reed, that is entirely inappropriate," Clara managed, her voice strangled. "Why? You like each other. Pa needs a wife, you need a husband. I need a ma. Seems pretty simple to me." "Adults don't make decisions based on simple arithmetic," Clara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Why not? The important things usually are simple. You're either going to stay or you're going to leave. You're either going to be a family or you're going to keep pretending you're just, what did you call it? Employer and employee?" Caleb shook his head. "That's a lie, and you both know it." Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought. The kid had a point. They'd been dancing around the truth for months now, maintaining careful distance while their hearts moved closer together. "It's complicated," Ethan said finally. "Why?" "Because—" He struggled for words. "Because Clara deserves better than some rough rancher who doesn't know the first thing about being a proper husband. She's educated, cultured, meant for better things than this isolated life." Clara set down her sewing with deliberate care. "Ethan Cole, I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. I don't want a proper husband from polite society. I had opportunities there, and I walked away because I couldn't stomach the hypocrisy. Men who spoke of Christian charity while letting children starve. Women who preached virtue while gossiping viciously about anyone different." She stood, crossing to where Ethan sat. "You want to know what I want? I want honesty, decency. Someone who treats me like an equal partner, not a decoration or a servant. Someone who sees a child in need and doesn't walk away. Someone who keeps his word even when it's hard." Her voice softened. "I want someone like you." Ethan stared at her, his heart hammering. Clara, and before you give me any nonsense about me being too good for you, understand this. I'm a dismissed schoolteacher with no family and limited prospects. You're a successful rancher who owns land, has built something real and lasting. By society's measure, you're far above my station. That's not how I see it. I know, that's why I love you. The words fell between them like stones into still water, sending ripples through everything. Ethan rose slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. You love me? Yes. I think I have for months now. I just didn't let myself acknowledge it because I was afraid. Afraid you'd send me away. Afraid I'd ruin what we were building. Afraid that hoping for more would destroy what we already had. And now? Now I'm tired of being afraid. Life is too short and too uncertain. Those men could have killed me. Caleb's fever could have taken him. We could lose everything tomorrow. She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. So I'm choosing to be brave. I love you, Ethan, and I don't need you to say it back right now. I just need you to know. Ethan covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face. What if I want to say it back? Her breath caught. Do you? I love you, Clara Bennett. I think I loved you from the moment you stood in that street demanding to know why I'd helped Caleb. You were fierce and protective and so damn brave, and every day since you've proven that my first impression was right. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm not. You are. You sacrifice without complaint. You work harder than anyone I know, and you love with your whole heart. Watching you with Caleb, seeing how you've transformed this place into a home, his voice roughened. I never thought I'd have this. Family, love, a reason to come home that wasn't just obligation. This is so romantic I might throw up, Caleb announced from across the room. They broke apart, laughing, the tension shattering into something warm and joyful. Clara wiped tears from her eyes while Ethan shook his head. Kids got terrible timing, Ethan said. Kids got perfect timing, Caleb corrected. You two would have kept dancing around it for another year if I hadn't pushed. He's probably right, Clara admitted. Ethan pulled her close again, propriety be damned. Marry me. That's not a question. Fine. Clara Bennett, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, Caleb's mother? Will you build this life with me? Not as employee or guest, but as my equal in every way? She smiled through tears. Yes. To all of it. Yes. Caleb whooped and jumped up, rushing over to throw his arms around both of them. They held each other, this unlikely family forged from loss and choice and love, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. But the world had a way of intruding, and it came 2 days later in the form of a visitor. Ethan was in the barn when he heard the horse approach. He stepped out to find a well-dressed man on a fine bay gelding, surveying the ranch with the appraising eye of someone who knew land and money. The stranger was maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to respect. "Help you," Ethan called. The man dismounted smoothly. "I'm looking for Ethan Cole." "You found him." "Excellent. My name is Robert Harrison. I'm an attorney from San Angelo, and I'm here on a rather delicate matter." Every instinct Ethan possessed went on alert. Lawyers rarely brought good news. "What kind of matter?" "Perhaps we could speak inside?" "It's rather cold, and this conversation may take some time." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Main house. Follow me." Clara was preparing dinner when they entered. She looked up, surprised, and Ethan saw her register the quality of Harrison's clothes, the expensive leather of his satchel. Her expression went carefully neutral. "Clara, this is Robert Harrison. He's a lawyer from San Angelo. Mr. Harrison, this is my fiancée, Clara Bennett." If Harrison was surprised by the introduction, he hid it well. "Miss Bennett, a pleasure." "Mr. Harrison," Clara's tone was polite but wary. "Should I leave you to your business?" "Actually, this concerns you as well. And the boy, Caleb Reed, is he here?" "He's doing chores," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "What's this about?" Harrison set his satchel on the table and removed several documents. "I'll be direct. I represent James Pritchard of San Angelo. You're familiar with him?" Claire's face went white. Ethan's hand found hers, squeezing hard. "We know him," Ethan said flatly. "He's the man who beat a child. What does he want?" "Mr. Pritchard has filed for custody of Caleb Reed. He claims to be the boy's legal guardian, his late mother's brother, and alleges that the child was taken from his care without proper authority." "Taken?" Claire's voice shook with fury. "Caleb ran away because Pritchard was abusing him." "That is, of course, disputed. Mr. Pritchard maintains he was providing discipline, not abuse, and that certain parties interfered with his lawful guardianship." Harrison's eyes moved to Clara. "He's also filed a complaint against you, Miss Bennett, for assault and interference. I stopped him from beating a child half to death." "So you acknowledge physical contact with Mr. Pritchard?" Clara's jaw clenched. "I pushed him away from Caleb. If that's assault, then yes, I'm guilty." Harrison made a note. "Mr. Pritchard is demanding return of the child and is considering pressing charges against both you and Mr. Cole for harboring a runaway minor." Ethan felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. "That son of a—" "Ethan," Clara's voice cut through his anger. "Let him finish." Harrison looked between them, and for the first time something like sympathy crossed his face. "I should tell you that I'm not here because I agree with my client. I'm here because I'm being paid to present his case. However, as an officer of the court, I have certain ethical obligations." "Meaning?" Ethan demanded. "Meaning that if I believed a child was genuinely in danger, I would have to act accordingly. So I need to ask you both very clearly, is Caleb Reed safe and well cared for in this home?" "He's thriving," Clara said firmly. "He's healthy, educated, loved, and protected. He has food, shelter, clothing, and most importantly, he has people who see him as a person, not a burden. And you, Mr. Cole? What's your interest in this child?" Ethan met Harrison's eyes steadily. "He's my son. Maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters. I'd die before I let someone hurt him again." Harrison studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. Then you should know that Mr. Pritchard has a legal leg to stand on. As Caleb's uncle, he does have rights. Unless those rights are terminated by a court, you have no legal claim to the boy." "So what are you saying?" Clara asked. "That we have to give him back?" "I'm saying that Pritchard can force the issue. He can petition the court, and given that he's the blood relative and unrelated parties who took the child without formal proceedings, the law favors him." Ethan's fists clenched. "The law is wrong." "Perhaps, but it's still the law." Harrison paused. "However, there are options." "What kind of options?" "You could file for formal custody yourselves, present evidence of Pritchard's unfitness as a guardian, but that would require witnesses, testimony, proof of abuse, and it would mean returning to San Angelo for court proceedings." "We have witnesses," Claire said quickly. "The sheriff saw Caleb's bruises. Other townspeople must have noticed." "The sheriff is Pritchard's cousin," Harrison interrupted gently. "And the other townspeople you mention? They've already provided statements supporting Pritchard's version of events. According to them, Caleb was a troubled, dishonest boy prone to stealing and lying." "That's not true." "I know, but proving it will be difficult." Harrison gathered his papers. "I need an answer for my client. Will you return the boy voluntarily, or will he need to pursue legal action?" "Neither," Ethan said. "We're not giving Caleb back, and Pritchard can take his legal action and—" "Ethan," Claire's hand tightened on his. "Think. If we fight this wrong, we could lose him completely." The truth of it hit like a gut punch. She was right. They couldn't just refuse and hope it went away. They needed a strategy. "How long do we have?" Ethan asked Harrison. "I need to file a response within 2 weeks. After that, the court sets a hearing date." Harrison stood. "For what it's worth, I hope you win. That boy clearly means something to you both. But hope doesn't win court cases. Evidence does." After Harrison left, Ethan and Clara sat in stunned silence. Finally, Clara spoke. "We need help. Real help. Someone who knows the law and how to fight this." "We also need to tell Caleb," Ethan said heavily. "He has a right to know." They found the boy in the barn brushing down one of the horses with careful strokes. He looked up when they entered, and whatever he saw in their faces made him go still. "What's wrong?" They sat him down and explained as gently as possible. Caleb listened without interrupting, his young face growing more and more closed. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You're going to send me back." "No," Ethan said fiercely. "Never. We're going to fight this." "How? You heard the lawyer. The law's on Uncle James's side." "The law can be changed. Challenged. We'll find a way." Caleb's eyes filled with tears he tried desperately to hide. "You can't fight the whole world, Pa, and I can't go back there. I can't." Clara pulled him into her arms. "You won't have to. We're a family, Caleb. Families protect each other." "But what if you can't? What if the court says I have to go back?" "Then we'll run," Ethan said quietly. Both Clara and Caleb stared at him. "We'll pack up and leave. Go somewhere they can't find us. I'll sell the ranch if I have to. Nothing matters more than keeping you safe." "You'd give up everything?" Caleb whispered. "For me?" "In a heartbeat. This ranch is just land and buildings. Your family." Caleb broke down then, sobbing into Clara's shoulder while she held him and murmured reassurances. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stayed that way until Caleb's tears ran dry. That night, after Caleb had cried himself to sleep, Ethan and Clara sat at the kitchen table making plans. "We need character witnesses," Clara said, making notes. "People who'll testify to Pritchard's cruelty and our fitness as guardians." Most of San Angelo sided with Pritchard. Who'd speak for us? Pete Thornton might. He saw how you cared for Caleb. And there was that serving girl at the hotel. She saw Caleb's condition when you first brought him in. Ethan nodded slowly. "We also need someone who saw the abuse firsthand. Someone Pritchard can't intimidate." "I saw it. I'll testify." "Clara, if you testify, they'll rake you over the coals. They'll bring up your dismissal, question your judgment, probably say you're an unstable woman with improper attachments. Let them. I stood up for Caleb once and lost my job. I'll do it again and take whatever they throw at me." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You're remarkable. You know that? I'm terrified. But I'm also done letting cruel people win just because fighting back is hard." They worked late into the night, building their case, listing potential witnesses, trying to anticipate Pritchard's arguments. When they finally went to bed, exhaustion pulled them under almost immediately. But Ethan woke in the dark hours before dawn to find Clara's side of the cabin empty. He found her on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. And all the ways it could go right?" "Those are harder to imagine right now." She leaned against his shoulder. "What if we lose him, Ethan? What if we do everything right and still lose?" "Then we'll find another way. I meant what I said. I'll run if I have to. Take you both somewhere they can't reach us. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, never settling, never being safe? If that's what it takes." She was quiet for a moment. "There might be another option, one we haven't considered." "What?" Clara turned to face him. "Marry me. Not in a few months, not when it's convenient. Now. This week. If we're legally married and you formally adopt Caleb, it strengthens our case. We'd be a legitimate family unit, not just people living together." "You want to marry me to strengthen a legal case?" "No. I want to marry you because I love you. But if it also helps us keep Caleb, then that's just practical." She took his hands. "We were going to marry anyway. Why wait? Why give Pritchard any more ammunition?" Ethan thought it through, turning it over in his mind. She was right. A married couple seeking custody would have more legal standing than a bachelor and his housekeeper. And the truth was, he didn't want to wait either. "All right, let's do it. But Clara, I want you to be sure. This isn't how you probably imagined getting married. No big ceremony, no celebration, just a quick trip to a justice of the peace. I don't care about ceremonies. I care about building a life with you and protecting our son. That's all the celebration I need." Our son. The words settled something deep in Ethan's chest. "Tomorrow, then. We'll ride to Denison, find a judge, make it official." They told Caleb over breakfast, and his face transformed with joy so pure it hurt to see. "Really? You're really getting married?" "Really," Claire confirmed. And after we're married, Ethan is going to formally adopt you, make you a Cole legally, not just in our hearts. So, Uncle James can't take me back? We're going to make it as hard as possible for him to even try, Ethan said. They left for Denison that morning, riding hard through cold that bit through their clothes. The town was larger than San Angelo, with a proper courthouse and several legal offices. Ethan found a judge willing to perform the ceremony that afternoon. Judge Marcus Brennan was a weathered man with kind eyes who'd seen enough of life to recognize truth when he heard it. He listened to their story without interruption, then nodded slowly. You understand that marriage for legal strategy is still marriage? The vows are binding regardless of your motives. Our motives are love, Clara said firmly. The legal benefits are just practical sense. Brennan smiled. Good answer. All right then, let's make this official. The ceremony was simple, performed in Brennan's chambers with his clerk as witness. There were no flowers, no music, no guests, just two people speaking vows they meant with every fiber of their being, and one boy watching with tears of happiness streaming down his face. When Brennan pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Clara gently, sealing the promise they'd made. Then Caleb was there, hugging them both. And for one perfect moment, everything else faded away. Afterward, Brennan prepared the adoption papers. This will take longer to process, usually several months for formal approval, but I can start the proceedings immediately and provide documentation that you filed. Will it help our case? Ethan asked. It shows commitment, planning, stability, all things courts like to see. Combined with your marriage certificate, it presents you as a legitimate family unit with the child's best interests at heart. Brennan paused. But I'll be honest with you. Blood relations still carry significant weight in custody cases. You'll need to prove Pritchard is unfit, not just that you're better suited. We'll prove it, Clara said. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, newly married and determined to fight. The marriage certificate and adoption filing papers were safely tucked in Ethan's jacket, their weapons in the coming battle. That night, Clara moved her things from the cabin to the main house. It felt right, natural, like pieces clicking into place. They'd been living as a family for months, now they were one legally too. As they prepared for bed, Clara caught Ethan's hand. No regrets? About marrying you? Not a single one. He pulled her close. Best decision I ever made, and I've made it twice now. Once when I asked you to come here, once when I asked you to stay forever. I love you, Ethan Cole. I love you too, Clara Cole. The name made her smile. She was Clara Cole now, a wife, a mother, a woman with a family to protect and a battle to win, and she'd never felt stronger in her life. The court date arrived like an approaching storm, inevitable, threatening, impossible to avoid. 2 weeks after their marriage, Ethan, Clara, and Caleb rode into San Angelo under gray skies that matched their mood. The town hadn't changed, but everything felt different now. They weren't running anymore. They were fighting. They'd spent those 2 weeks gathering evidence and tracking down anyone willing to testify. Pete Thornton had agreed immediately, as had the hotel serving girl, a young woman named Mary Sullivan, who remembered Caleb's haunted eyes and skeletal frame. Clara had even convinced the shopkeeper's wife, Mrs. Murphy, who'd chased Caleb with a broom, to at least provide a written statement confirming the boy's malnourished condition. But their strongest witness was someone unexpected. Dr. Samuel Chen, the town's physician, had examined Caleb months earlier at the sheriff's request after Clara's initial complaint. He'd documented the injuries but been overruled by the sheriff and town council. When Clara tracked him down, she found a man carrying his own regrets. I knew that boy was being abused, Dr. Chen had said quietly. I documented everything, the malnutrition, the bruises in various stages of healing, the broken rib that had been improperly set. But I was told to keep quiet, that it was a family matter, that Pritchard was a respected citizen, and I was just a Chinese doctor who should be grateful to practice here at all. Will you testify now? Clara had asked. Dr. Chen had met her eyes steadily. Yes. I should have fought harder the first time. I won't make that mistake again. Now, as they tied their horses outside the courthouse, Ethan saw Pritchard for the first time. The man stood on the courthouse steps, well-dressed and confident, surrounded by supporters. He was exactly what Ethan had imagined, prosperous-looking, respectable in appearance, the kind of man who could smile while he destroyed you. When Pritchard's eyes found Caleb, the boy instinctively pressed closer to Clara. Pritchard's expression shifted, a flash of something cold and possessive before his public mask slid back into place. "Caleb!" Pritchard called out, his voice carrying false warmth. "Come here, boy. I've missed you." Caleb's hand found Clara's, gripping tight. "I'm not going over there." "It's all right," Ethan said quietly. "Stay with us. He can't touch you." They entered the courthouse together, and the proceeding began with Judge Walter Price presiding. Price was Old San Angelo establishment, a contemporary of Pritchard's, part of the same social circle. Ethan's stomach sank when he saw the judge's familiar nod to Pritchard. Pritchard's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a concerned uncle whose troubled nephew had been kidnapped by strangers with questionable motives. He portrayed Caleb as a habitual liar and thief, Clara as an unstable woman dismissed from her teaching position for violence, and Ethan as an opportunist who'd taken the boy for cheap labor. Mr. Pritchard provided discipline when necessary, as any responsible guardian would, the lawyer concluded. He gave the boy shelter, food, and structure. That the boy ran away speaks to his ungrateful and dishonest nature, not to any failing on my client's part. Then it was their turn. The lawyer Judge Brennan had recommended, a sharp woman named Elizabeth Ward from Denison, stood to present their case. "Your Honor, this case isn't about a runaway child. It's about a boy who fled for his life from a man who systematically starved, beat, and terrorized him. The evidence will show that James Pritchard is not a concerned guardian, but an abuser who views this child as property, not family." She called Dr. Chen first. The physician took the stand and presented his medical records, describing Caleb's condition with clinical precision. The child showed signs of chronic malnutrition, underweight by at least 20 pounds, showing stunted growth consistent with long-term food deprivation. He had bruises in various stages of healing on his arms, back, and legs, pattern bruising consistent with being struck with a belt or strap, a fractured rib that had healed improperly, suggesting previous untreated injury. "Could these injuries have other explanations?" Pritchard's lawyer asked on cross-examination. "Boys get into fights, climb trees, have accidents. Not injuries of this nature and frequency. The pattern was consistent with systematic abuse, not childhood accidents. Yet you said nothing at the time. You documented this alleged abuse and did nothing to stop it." Dr. Chen's face tightened with shame. "I was pressured to remain silent. That was wrong, and I regret it. But my silence then doesn't make the abuse any less real." Mary Sullivan testified next, describing the night she'd brought dinner to Ethan's hotel room and seen Caleb's condition. He ate like he'd never seen food before, and he was so thin, so scared. He kept looking at Mr. Cole like he expected to be hit. Pete Thornton took the stand and described seeing Ethan with Caleb and Clara, noting the obvious care and concern. "I've known Ethan Cole for years. He's honest, hardworking, and decent. The way he treated that boy, and the way the boy responded, that wasn't an opportunist and his victim. That was a father and son." Then Clara testified, and the courtroom went silent as she described what she'd witnessed. "I saw James Pritchard dragging Caleb by his hair across the schoolyard. The boy was crying, begging him to stop. Pritchard had his belt out and was beating him, not disciplining, beating, striking him across the back and legs while shouting that he was worthless, that he should have died with his mother." "And you intervened," Ward prompted. "I put myself between them and told him to stop. When he tried to push past me, I shoved him back, hard enough that he fell." "Why did you risk your position to intervene?" Claire's voice rang clear. "Because watching a child be beaten and doing nothing makes you complicit in that abuse. I'd rather lose 100 jobs than look away when someone needs help." Pritchard's lawyer stood. "Miss Bennett, excuse me, Mrs. Cole. Isn't it true you were dismissed for violent and insubordinate behavior?" "I was dismissed for protecting a child from abuse. That's a matter of interpretation. Isn't it also true that you had no legal authority to remove Caleb from his guardian's care?" "Moral authority outweighs legal authority when a child's life is at stake. How convenient that you now find yourself married to a wealthy rancher. One might wonder about your true motives." Ward objected immediately. "Your Honor, Mrs. Cole's marriage is not on trial here." "Sustained. Move on, counselor." "But the damage was done. The implication planted that Clara had somehow orchestrated this for personal gain. Ethan testified next, describing how he'd found Caleb and what had transpired since. He spoke plainly, without embellishment, and the truth of his words carried weight. I didn't plan to take in a child. I was heading home from a cattle drive, wanted a hot meal and a bed. But I saw this boy who'd given up on the world, and I couldn't walk away. My own life was saved by someone who chose not to walk away from me. I was paying that forward. And now you've adopted him? Filed the papers, yes. Caleb is my son in every way that matters. I'd stake my life on it. Even though you'd only known him a few weeks when you took him in? Time doesn't determine family. Choice does. Commitment does. I chose him, and I'll stand by that choice until my last breath. Then came the moment everyone had been dreading. Ward called Caleb to the stand. The boy looked impossibly small in the witness chair, pale but determined. Ward approached him gently. Caleb, I know this is hard, but I need you to tell the court, in your own words, what life was like with James Pritchard. Caleb's voice started quiet, but grew stronger as he spoke. Uncle James hated me. He told me I was a burden, that I should have died instead of Ma. He said I was worthless, that nobody would ever want me. Did he hurt you? All the time. If I worked too slow, he'd hit me with his belt. If I ate too much, he'd lock me in the shed overnight with no blanket. Once I broke a plate by accident and he didn't feed me for 3 days. Caleb's hands were shaking, but he kept going. I tried to be good. I tried to do everything right, but nothing was ever good enough. He said I was poison, that everything I touched turned bad. Why didn't you tell anyone? I did. I told the sheriff. He said Uncle James had a right to discipline me however he saw fit. I told my teacher before Miss Bennett came, and she said I was lying for attention. Caleb's voice cracked. So I stopped telling. What was the point if nobody believed me? What changed? Miss Bennett believed me, and when Uncle James was beating me, she didn't look away. She stopped him. Caleb looked at Clara, his eyes bright with tears. Nobody ever protected me before. Nobody ever thought I was worth protecting. And Mr. Cole? How did you meet him? Caleb told the story simply. The alley, the hotel, the offer of food and shelter with no strings attached. I thought he was lying at first, but he wasn't. He just cared, like I mattered. Do you want to go back to James Pritchard? No. The word was absolute. I'd rather die than go back there. Pa and Miss Bennett, Ma now, they're my family. They see me. They care about me. They make me feel like I'm worth something. Pritchard's lawyer approached for cross-examination, and his tone was gentle, almost paternal. Caleb, I understand you've been through difficult times, and it's natural to be angry at authority figures who discipline you. He didn't discipline me. He tortured me. That's a very serious accusation. Couldn't it be that you're exaggerating because you prefer the easier life at Mr. Cole's ranch? There's nothing easy about ranch life, Caleb shot back. I work hard every day. But the difference is, when I do good work, Pa tells me I did well. When I mess up, he helps me fix it. He doesn't beat me and call me worthless. You've learned to say the right things, haven't you? To make yourself sympathetic? Caleb's eyes flashed. I'm telling the truth. You don't believe me because I'm just a kid, and Uncle James is rich and important, but that doesn't make what he did okay. That doesn't make him a good person. The lawyer tried several more angles, but Caleb held firm, his testimony unshakable. When he finally stepped down, Clara pulled him into her arms and held him tight. Then Pritchard took the stand, and the mask of respectability was perfect. He spoke of his dear sister, of his reluctant acceptance of her orphaned son, of his attempts to instill discipline and work ethic in a troubled child. I never wanted to strike the boy, Pritchard said, managing to sound pained, but he was incorrigible, stealing, lying, refusing to work. I tried patience, I tried kindness, but sometimes discipline is necessary. And when he ran away, I was beside myself with worry. Then I learned he'd been taken in by strangers who'd filled his head with lies. They've poisoned him against me, turned him into a weapon to attack my character. Ward's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Pritchard, Dr. Chen testified that Caleb was severely malnourished. How do you explain that? The boy refused to eat. I can't force feed him. He refused to eat, or you withheld food as punishment. I may have sent him to bed without supper once or twice when he misbehaved. That's hardly abuse. Once or twice? Or regularly? Systematically? I don't recall the exact frequency. Ward produced a ledger. This is your household account book, subpoenaed for this case. According to your own records, you spent an average of $2 per month on food for yourself and Caleb combined. That's barely enough for one person, let alone two. Where was the food going, Mr. Pritchard? Pritchard's face flushed. Those numbers are taken out of context. No context makes $2 a month adequate to feed a growing child. You starved him deliberately, didn't you? I provided what I could afford. You own a successful store. You're one of the wealthiest men in San Angelo. You could certainly afford to feed one small boy. Ward's voice was ice. You chose not to because you viewed him as a burden you resented. That's not true. Then why did multiple witnesses hear you tell Caleb he should have died instead of his mother? Why did you call him poison? I was frustrated. People say things in anger. People say what they truly believe in anger, Mr. Pritchard. You hated that boy, and you made him suffer for the crime of existing. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Price banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! When calm was restored, both sides gave closing arguments. Pritchard's lawyer appealed to tradition, blood relations, and the sanctity of family authority. Ward appealed to conscience, to the evidence, to the moral imperative of protecting vulnerable children. Then they waited while Judge Price deliberated. The minutes stretched into an hour, then two. Caleb sat between Ethan and Clara, holding both their hands, his face pale but brave. Finally, Price returned. His expression was unreadable as he surveyed the courtroom. This court has reviewed the evidence and testimony presented. The question before us is not whether Mr. and Mrs. Cole are suitable guardians. Clearly they are. The question is whether James Pritchard's parental rights should be terminated and whether custody should be transferred. He paused, and Ethan felt his heart hammering against his ribs. The evidence of abuse is substantial and compelling. Dr. Chen's medical records, combined with multiple witness testimonies, paint a picture of systematic neglect and cruelty. Mr. Pritchard's own household records corroborate the testimony regarding food deprivation. Pritchard's face was darkening, a vein pulsing in his temple. However, Price continued, this court must also consider precedent and the importance of blood relations. Mr. Pritchard is Caleb's legal guardian, appointed by virtue of being the boy's closest living relative. To override that requires more than evidence of imperfect care. It requires proof of unfitness so severe that maintaining the relationship would endanger the child. Ethan's stomach dropped. They were going to lose. All the evidence, all the testimony, and they were still going to lose because Pritchard had money and connections, and, having considered all factors, Price said, this court finds that such proof exists. James Pritchard is hereby deemed unfit to serve as Caleb Reed's guardian. His parental rights are terminated, effective immediately. The courtroom exploded. Pritchard was on his feet, shouting. His supporters were protesting, but Price's gavel cracked like thunder. Order! I will have order, or I will clear this courtroom. Silence fell, shocked and tense. Furthermore, Price continued, this court grants full custody of Caleb Reed to Ethan and Clara Cole, with their pending adoption to be finalized upon completion of the standard review process. The child is not to have any contact with James Pritchard unless and until Caleb, as a legal adult, chooses otherwise. Caleb made a sound between a sob and a laugh. Clara pulled him close, tears streaming down her face. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, his own eyes burning. They'd won. Against all odds, against power and money and precedent, they'd won. Pritchard tried to approach them as they left the courthouse, but Ethan stepped between him and his family. You stay away from my son, Ethan said quietly, his voice deadly calm. You come near him, you speak to him, you even think about him, and I will make you regret it. Are we clear? Pritchard's face was twisted with rage. You can't keep him from me forever. The boy is blood. The boy is mine. The court said so. Now back off before I forget we're in public. Something in Ethan's eyes must have convinced Pritchard because the man stepped back, his mouth working soundlessly. Then he turned and stalked away, his supporters following like kicked dogs. They rode out of San Angelo that afternoon, putting distance between themselves and the town that had failed Caleb so completely. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stopped to make camp. Caleb sat by the fire, still processing what had happened. "It's really over? I don't have to go back?" "It's really over," Clara confirmed. "You're ours now, legally, officially, permanently." "I never thought—" His voice broke. "I never thought anyone would fight for me like that. Choose me over everything else." Ethan knelt beside him. "That's what family does, son. We fight for each other. We choose each other. Not because we have to, but because we want to." "I want to change my name," Caleb said suddenly. "Not just legally. I want to be Caleb Cole, not Reed Cole." "You sure?" Ethan asked. "Reed was your parents' name, your mother's name." "Ma would understand. She'd want me to be happy, to be safe. And I am, with you. So yeah, I'm sure. Caleb Cole. That's who I want to be." Clara wiped her eyes. "Then Caleb Cole you are." They sat together under the stars, this family forged from loss and choice and stubborn love. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They still had a ranch to run, challenges to face, a life to build, but they'd face it together. 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. Judge Brennan himself traveled to the ranch to present the papers, witnessing Ethan legally claim Caleb as his son. "Congratulations," Brennan said, shaking Ethan's hand. "You've built something good here. Don't take it for granted." "Never," Ethan promised. That evening, they celebrated with a dinner that Clara had spent all day preparing. The table was laden with Caleb's favorite foods, and laughter filled the house that had once been so silent. As they cleared the dishes, Caleb hung back, his expression thoughtful. "Pa, can I ask you something?" "Always." "That first night in San Angelo when you stopped in the alley, what made you do it? What made you care?" Ethan thought back to that moment, the whisper in the dust, the defeated slump of a child's shoulders, the echo of his own past. "I saw someone who needed help. And I remembered what it felt like to need help and not get it. I guess I decided I didn't want to be the person who walks away." "But you didn't just help. You changed everything. You gave me a home, a family, a future. Why?" "Because you were worth it. Because you deserved better than what the world had given you. Because—" Ethan paused, searching for the right words. "Because sometimes love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. I chose you, Caleb, and I'd make that choice again every single day." Caleb's eyes filled with tears, but he was smiling. "I love you, Pa. I love you too, son." Later that night, Ethan stood on the porch with Clara, watching the stars emerge. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Gambling everything on strangers?" Clara leaned against his shoulder. "Not for 1 second. You gave me purpose when I'd lost it. You gave me family when I was alone. You gave me love when I'd stopped believing in it. Pretty sure it was mutual. Then we're both lucky." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright in the lamplight spilling from the house. "Do you remember what you said that first night? That you were just offering today and Caleb could decide about tomorrow?" "I remember. Well, I'm deciding about tomorrow and the day after that, and every day for the rest of my life. I choose this. I choose us." Ethan pulled her close, kissing her softly. "So do I." From inside the house, they heard Caleb's voice calling for them, and they turned back toward the warmth and light. This family they'd built from broken pieces had become something whole, something strong, something that would endure. Years later, when Caleb was grown with children of his own, he'd tell them about the night a stranger stopped in an alley and proved that someone cared. He'd tell them about the woman who stood up for him when no one else would. He'd tell them about the family built not from blood, but from choice. And he'd tell them the most important lesson he'd learned from that whisper in the dust. Sometimes one act of kindness can rewrite a life. Sometimes choosing to care when the world says to look away makes all the difference. Sometimes love is simply refusing to walk away from someone who needs you. And that refusal to walk away, that stubborn, fierce, unwavering commitment to another person's worth, that's what transforms strangers into family and empty houses into homes. Caleb Cole knew this truth in his bones, had lived it every day since a dusty evening in San Angelo. He carried it with him through his entire life, and he passed it on to his children, who passed it to theirs. The whisper that once said nobody cares had been answered, definitively and forever, by 3 people who'd chosen differently, by 3 people who'd proven that somebody always cares. You just have to be willing to be that somebody. And in that willingness lies everything that matters, everything that endures, everything that makes life worth living.